Welcome to the Encore Audio Archives YouTube channel. I'm Taper Dave, and this is my channel. I've uploaded hundreds of talks here that I've recorded at meetings in West LA, and I've also recorded conventions starting in 2013. I've got a bunch of those up. And Walt and Mary Murray, the original owners of Encore Audio Archives, started the company in the 80s, and Walt recorded Joe and Charlie's and a bunch of stuff down in Vista, California. My sobriety date is June 20th of 1994. I hope you find something you like, so please like and subscribe to my channel and comment down below. If you want to hear something that I don't have or that you don't see, I'll see that I get it. Anyways, take care and have a great day if you want to.
Hello everybody, I'm an alcoholic. My name's Keith. Most important thing is I can share with you that it hasn't been necessary for me to take a drink or do any dope since May the 11th, 1976, and for that I'm especially grateful. I'm glad to be here and glad to be sober, and glad to be in a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. I want to thank my friends from my home group who came up with me from Orange County, and I want to thank my father for coming up with me. My father's here visiting from Oklahoma this holidays, and I rode all the way up here with him, all the way out here with him. He's a lawyer, and he didn't interrogate me one time. I used to say to him, you know, how come it is that every time that we have a conversation I feel like you're interrogating me? And he said, because I was. I've never resented my father as a lawyer. I've always needed one. I kept him on retainer for years till he got so drunk he couldn't show up for my court case. And matter of fact, he got so drunk he couldn't show up for his. But my father's sober 18 years. He could never remember my belly button birthday. And yeah, it's a good deal. I mean, he was 62 when he sobered up, by God. I couldn't hang in there that long. But he could never. God has a funny sense of humor, you know. I mean, it's just, my father, he was always drunk, couldn't remember my belly button birthday. You know, he's always a day before, a day late or something, and it's his sobriety date. Turns out he sobered up on my belly button birthday date, August the 27th, and so he has to remember it now, you know. And I have 14 months, a little over 14 months of seniority on him, and I don't ever let him forget it. And we have fun, and it's good. We have a good relationship, and I'm very fortunate. I'm really fortunate in the fact that my family found the program, and we have a good relationship together, and I'm very blessed. And I never forget that. That's a very important thing, because that doesn't always happen. I'm married. I've been with the same woman for 35 years, and she goes to 4 or 5 Al-Anon meetings a week in order to live with me. And I have a daughter who's 32, almost 33 years old, and she's been went to Alateen and been in Al-Anon for 19 years, and they're very active in their respective programs, and it's a way of life for our family. So I'm very blessed in the sense that, you know, my family came here and got the deal. The book says some of us do, some of us don't. That's my story. I came here with a wife and a kid, and I'd been drinking for over 22 years, and I had come out of a drunken family, and a lot of my family were drunks and died drunk. All the problems involved with alcoholism, and I don't blame them for any of that. I mean, by golly, I'll tell you what, if you grow up in an alcoholic home, which is full of selfish, self-centered, self-seeking, neurotic, insane people, and you get out of there alive, you're a winner. Yeah. And then you come to Alcoholics Anonymous and you sit down in a room full of selfish, self-centered, self-seeking, neurotic, insane people, and we say you're home. You're going to need a lot of the things that you did out there to, you know, to make it in here. I mean, the resentments in here will kill you if nothing else will, you know. I don't know if I was born an alcoholic. I know when I took my first drink, an alcoholic was born, and it didn't make any difference to me. I drank anything I could, any way I could, anyhow I could. I don't identify with anybody that specializes. If you're a specialist, that's fine. I'm a pig myself. I would drink anything, anytime, anywhere with anybody. I would drink a little beer and think maybe I ought to do something, smoke a little weed and kind of fantasize how I was going to do it. I'd shoot a little speed so I could have the strength to do whatever I was going to do, and I'd snort a little coke so I could, look cool when I did it, and then I'd drink a little whiskey and forget what the hell it was I was going to do. So the only thing I've never done, now I'm a blackout drinker, but not intentionally, so the only thing I've never done is I've never had a pap smear. And I drank with some people who would have given me one. That's what I got to look forward to if I go back out. I was born in Texas, and that doesn't necessarily make you an alcoholic. It gave me certain characteristics. I've always had them. I've had the ability to recognize all your character defects, and I've had a need to tell you about it. And that made drinking a contact sport for me, is what it did. I grew up in the Texas-Oklahoma panhandle, and where the men were men and the sheep ran scared. And the good old boys, redneck tough, and the Baptists bought all the liquor license, so we drank 3-2 beer and White Lightning, moonshine, and I grew up on moonshine, and it gets you there right now. And I was a hyperactive kid. I had an uncle who was a doctor, and he gave me amphetamines to calm me down. To this day, I don't know why you would want to give somebody who had an abundance of energy speed, but they did, and I had an acquired taste for that. It's like going 190 miles an hour with your feet nailed to the floor, and I like that. On occasion, I did some downers along the way, but strange things happened to me while I was nodded off, and I didn't necessarily like that. I wanted to be awake, and so I stayed up most of the time. I'm the kind of an alcoholic who went places and did things. I've always liked the deal. I don't care if it's 50 cents, 50 million, deal me in. I've always liked the deal. I've always gone where the deal is. As far as I'm concerned, this is the best deal in town tonight, and that's why I'm here. That ain't never changed. But that got me in a lot of trouble. I went a lot of places and did a lot of things. I came to Alcoholics Anonymous for almost 4 years, and I sat in meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I listened to people talk about how alcohol took all their inadequacies and filled all their holes and made them feel full, and they could get out and dance and do things and feel, and I never identified with that at all, because I'm the guy that brought the band. I brought the party, I brought the booze, brought the gals. I always did. I just was there. There was periods of times whenever I'd be out ahead of everybody, and everybody else would turn to the right or left, and I was lonely out there, but so what? Just get another group. And I had a terrible time with that, because it's a strange thing. Fear is an emotion that has two basic ways for most of us, not even just alcoholics, but fear to some people is a demobilizer, and you'll hunker down like an old mule. It pulls people down. It makes them feel inadequate and backward. And to other people, fear is like an adrenaline rush. And I drove fear like a fast car. Fear's been my partner all my life, and I knew that I was a scared little boy that just grew up to be a scared little boy. But fear to me was an energizer. And I drove fear, and then I put alcohol and amphetamines on top of that, and I just went helter-skelter for years, in and in out, through people's lives, day and night. And consequently, I got locked up periodically. Well-meaning psychiatrists set me down and wanted to talk to me about my behavior patterns and various things like that, and I learned early on to give them the answers that they wanted. And, they gave me certain labels at one point in time. The state of California said I was a sociopath. And at that point in time in my life, I'd have much rather been a sociopath than an alcoholic. It just had a little ring to it, I don't know. And but I'm happy to report tonight that after a little over 19 years of sobriety, I'm not a sociopath. I have a conscience, damn you. AA gave me a conscience and screwed up all my ability to screw over other people and made me be willing to stand for my own consequences. And that's most of the time through my life, most thing that I didn't want to do was be, responsible. I didn't even know what responsibility was. I had to come to AA to find out that responsibility is the ability to respond. I just didn't know what that was. And I didn't slow down. I didn't speed up. I just went at one pace, 110 miles an hour most of the time. And I got in a lot of trouble. I got a couple of character defects that have caused me a lot of pain. One of them is you can line 10 women against that wall over there, and I'll get the sickest one out of the bunch every time. Every time. There's some in here tonight. I can feel them. I love them sick women, man. They're ready all the time. Ready to go. Don't need to pack either. Ready. Boom. Let's go. And I wasn't doing nothing one night, and when I wasn't doing nothing, well, I usually did something, and I started to fight, and I met my present wife, and she finished it. And we set up a little light housekeeping, and we dated for 2 weeks, and they nicknamed us Hatchet and Hammer. And I mean, it was just it was one of the most brutal relationships. God, I just loved it. We used to beat the hell out of each other and call it foreplay, and just absolutely insane. And I loved it, and so did she. It was the making up that we liked, you know. And after a period of time, I had to leave Texas. That'll happen to you. In AA, they call those trips geographics. But when I left Texas, they called it unlawful flight to avoid prosecution. And I loaded up my wife and my daughter and my 120-pound German Shepherd dog and my cat and the station wagon and a trailer on behind, and we started out for California because a friend of mine named Lion Shorty offered me a job on a ranch 40 miles west of Long Beach, and I didn't have sense enough to know that was ocean. And oh, ye of little faith, you know. We took off and we left Oklahoma, and it took us a month to get here. And by the time we got here, where everybody was absolutely nuts, the dog would stand behind me and drill all over the back of my neck. And when we'd pass an 18-wheeler going the other way, he'd run all the way to the back of the station wagon, bump his head against the back window of the station wagon, fall on the cat. They'd have a dog and cat fight on top of the kid, and the kid would start bawling, and she'd start bitching, and I'd start drinking, and we did that one day at a time for 30 days. I mean, when I drank, it wasn't a whole lot different than the way I live today. Today I live one day at a time, and back then I just lived like there was no tomorrow. And when we got to California, I had a drunken uncle help me find a place to live. We got a little house over there, and nobody lived in it for a couple of years, got a real deal on it, and moved in there. There was a bunch of hippies lived on one side of me, and a motorcycle gang lived on the other side of me, and, you know, got a real deal. And I'd never seen no hippies down in Texas where I'd been, and these cats were taking that LSD and wandering around the neighborhood, you know, with no clothes on. Occasionally they'd lay in the front yard and watch the sun come up and go down and go blind. Some interesting things like that. And I had a conversation with them one time. I talked to them about my drinking because I was having a little trouble drinking. When I drank, I went crazy, and so they had a couple of these hippies come and talk to me about it, and they said what I needed to do was smoke Thai sticks. And so they figured that I might be part Indian, and Indians shouldn't drink fire water. And okay, sounds good to me, but what do you do when you smoke Thai sticks? And they said, oh, we sit around the park and wait for your ice cream truck to come by, you know. I never wanted to wait for no ice cream truck. I might have wanted to rob the ice cream truck, but I didn't want to wait on it, you know. I mean, well, what the heck, you know, I was an Indian, so I might as well have a reservation. And so, you know, I just fit right in. I'd go off and do my thing, and I'm the kind of guy that would, I didn't move my family much a couple of times, but basically I didn't stay home and drink. I went places and did things, and I'd be gone for a while, and then I'd come roaring home, and I usually brought my friends home with me. You know, they're the guys that don't want to go home and fight with their old ladies, so they come watch me fight with mine. The guys that stand behind you, and my wife, somewhere along the line, she started carrying a 12-inch butcher knife around all the time, and I like guns myself. Guns will enhance conversation, and I used to shoot my gun off next to somebody's ear, and they'd pay attention to you. They couldn't hear nothing, but they'd pay attention to you. And my wife is just crazier than a loon. I'd stick my gun right on the end of her nose, and she'd stick her knife right in my stomach, and she'd say, you go first. And I said, if I shoot you, you'll die. She said, I know, but when the bullet hits me, it'll knock me back, and the knife will go forward, and you'll die too. And you know, there's Oriental warriors that train all their life to be able to, you know, be mindset to get the last kill. You know, they're willing to give up their life to get the last kill. A pre-Al-Anon knows that intuitively. They do not have to be trained. And I passed out on her one time 15 minutes into a 2-hour conversation. They don't like that. And and I passed out on my stomach, and when I came to the next morning, well, God, something's wrong with my back. And she said, oh, let me see. And she said, well, you've been drinking that old raw gut whiskey, and you broke out of acne of the back. She stabbed me while I was passed out 150 some times in my back with this butcher knife. Wasn't too sharp, but stabbed me all over my back, and I didn't know what was wrong with my back. She peeled that old shirt off, and she said, well, let me get the rubbing alcohol, and oh yeah. And I tell you what, when I lived down there in Texas, them Baptists tried to get me to find Jesus. So let me tell you, that alcohol bath got me closer to Jesus than any of them Baptists ever did. I was a buzzard Baptist, you know. That's the only time I ever went to church is whenever there was something dead or something to eat. It's a funeral. Must all be Methodist. I know, that joke don't go over in the South either. But anyway, I ended up just insane. The book talks about some of us who will get so insanely drunk that we pass out and you think we'd be down forever, and yet we wake up, and search madly in the morning for a drink, and that's the way I was. That's the way I am. I don't lay in bed and pontificate the residue much. I would get so drunk that you'd think I'd be passed out for a month, and I'd wake right up in the morning, and I'd go out in the kitchen, put about 100 mini bennies in the blender, and put some orange juice, a couple of raw eggs, and pour me a big glass of tequila or vodka, and hit it a couple of times with some Tabasco sauce so I could call it Bloody Mary, and pound that down, and I'd have an intuitive thought immediately. I'd think, maybe I ought to do my civic duty, like mow my front yard. So I'd go out in the garage, find my lawnmower. It's out there somewhere buried underneath all the projects that I had. About that time, that breakfast cocktail I just had went off 2 inches behind my belly button, and if I couldn't find the rope to start my mower, I could push start that sucker with a load on like that. I get out in the front yard. It didn't have any grass. I had front dirt and a lot of dandelions, so I'd mow my dandelions at about 4:30 or 5 o'clock in the morning with a good load on, and I didn't have any grass catcher, so I didn't have grass, so I didn't need a grass catcher. I'd be slinging my dandelions and dirt and stuff all over the street and everything, and all the Christians on the other side of the street, they always lived on the other side of the street, had all them dichondra lawns and all that stuff. I had one neighbor over there, he'd just stand out there when I mowed my dirt, and he'd just go crazy because he had this fancy lawn, and he just hated to see me mow my stuff, and the little vein in his forehead would just pulsate. I said, well, someday I'm gonna put green concrete in my front yard so I don't ever mow it ever again. I'm gonna bury my lawnmower right out here in the middle of it. I never did get the concrete out there, but I did. One morning my mower died, and I don't know, must have been something I brought from Texas. If a horse dies or breaks a leg down there while you shoot it, and so I just shot my lawnmower one morning, the 44 mag, about 5 o'clock in the morning. Quite a ceremonial funeral there, and but the cops came and ran my head into their nightstick 5 or 6 times out in the front yard. My wife came running out and screaming at the police, and she was crazy, and so they put handcuffs on her, and I said, now you got it right, get that crazy woman out here and we'll all be all right. And the cops said something dirty, rotten about my wife. Nobody talked bad about her but me, so I hit the cop, and they took the handcuffs right off of her and put them on me, and they take me right down to jail and put me in jail, and then she'd come down and write a hot check and get me out, because that was her job, and I could go home and sink into a little depression, because what goes up's got to come down. I had an old recliner in my house that I'd lay in, and I'd kind of lean back, and I like to, when I was kind of trying to work through something, I'd drink Red Mountain wine and drop a few Reds and kind of cycle in there, and I had an old Winchester 97 shotgun my grandpappy had given me, and I'd lay there in that chair. She'd go get all the other hopeless women and children in the neighborhood and bring them over there and line up on their line of contempt across the room and look at me with that pitiful look like, you no good son of a so-and-so. I'd put on my little show for them. I'd jack my shotgun back and stick the barrel in my mouth and click the trigger. It was empty, of course. I didn't want to commit suicide till I had a real crowd. But one time I seen some red go by when I jacked that gun back. I wonder what that was. I pulled over to the side and clicked the trigger. That woman put a shell in that gun. I almost killed myself, she snuck that shell in there, blew the air conditioner right out of the damn wall. And the cops came and arrested me and took me down and put me in the nut ward and talked to me about my behavior patterns. And I didn't know why. I'd been there enough times, and I knew I had to give him a story, so I told him I know what the problem is. I was in the big war, the real big war, the real war, you know, and I was a paratrooper, and I was jumping and jumping and jumping, and come time to jump, and I froze right in the door, and they kicked me out of the door, and I don't know, I fell 15, 20,000 feet, my chute didn't open, I landed, a tree flung me over the lid on my head, and I laid there, and some people came and got me and took me and put me in a hospital, and they said I did something to my head, and when I take these little pills, well, I go crazy, especially if I drink, and the psychiatrist said, just a minute, and he went over and called my wife and told her that I was at the wrong hospital. I should be at the VA hospital. And she said, what the hell for? He was kicked out of the service. He never, you know, I mean, just when I had a good story, she wouldn't go along with it, you know. But those strengths gave me a little card, said I was crazy, and that I could come back and let myself in that nut ward anytime I wanted to. And I never knowingly or willingly ever let myself in voluntarily, because there's no doorknobs on the inside of the doors in there. I know that. I may be sick, but I'm not stupid. But I did show that card to some of my friends, and they nicknamed me Psycho and stuff like that, you know, and you know, kind of impressed me in the bars I drank in, you know. And I found myself standing in front of the judge, and the judge talking to me about me, and he's got the right guy, and he's talking to me about something I don't remember doing, and he's talking to me about doing some time that I didn't want to do, and through a series of events while they talked to me about going to Alcoholics Anonymous. I'd never been to AA before, never heard of AA before, and so I volunteered to go to AA, and I went home, and my wife had been to see a lawyer, and the lawyer talked to her about me going to AA, and you know, I said, well, I knew it'd come to that. I'm going to go to the A&A thing, and they got it in the church over here, and it starts at 8:30, and it's over at 10. So about 8 o'clock, she came over and stuck her butcher knife in my face and said, get up, we're going. And I got up and got in the car, and we went out, and there was a church, had one door in, one door out, same door, big AA sign out there, and she pulled up out in front and said, what time's the meeting over? I said, 10. She said, I'm going to tell you something, Ace, if your ass comes out of that door before 10, I'm going to gut you. Now, you can keep a guy like me in an AA, mean you got a crazy woman waiting outside the door with a 12-inch butcher knife. I won't hear nothing, but I'll stay in the meeting. And so I went to one meeting a week for 4 months, and didn't drink or use nothing. The most miserable time of my entire life. I was as dry as a fire hazard, really. And but I didn't do nothing. I just went home and waited, and then went back to another AA meeting the next Monday, you know, and sat in there. And I looked around the room, and most of the people in that room I wouldn't even drank with, you know, and I didn't hear nothing except one guy near the end. One guy said, we won't guarantee after tonight you've had your last drink, but we'll guarantee after tonight you'll never enjoy another one. Oh, I hated him. Hated him, because after 4 months I did a little inventory, looked over my old dog sitting next to me, pat him on the head, cat's in my lap purring, the kid sitting over there, she's in the kitchen, I'm back in the big bedroom, beat the deal down at the courthouse, and I thought to myself, Self, you have prematurely gone to A&A. Now I'm going to try a little B&B, and I mean, I know I'll be there someday, but when I get there, I'll be old, and it'll all be over. And so I went back out and got struck drunk, and I'll guarantee you my life changed. And it did not get better, because it always gets worse. And the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous says that what we're supposed to share is what it used to be like, what happened, and what it's like today in a general way. That's all I have. I'm not an expert on anything but screwing up my life. And I'll tell you, I hear a lot of people talk about what it used to be like and then how wonderful it is, or what it's like today, and there seems to be a tendency to skip over that, what happened. It's a real important thing for me, because it's that point of incomprehensible demoralization that I call a bottom, which is a place where I could not go until I was, you know, willing to go and let go, and then I went there. It's a point in my life where there were no feelings. It was not a point in reality, it was a period of time. And I know what it's like to stand in my kitchen, look down the hallway, a little 9-year-old girl's standing down at the end of that hallway, and I'm sucking on a bottle of vodka. And she's looking at me, and I'm looking at her. And she didn't say, Daddy, what are you doing? Come play with me. She looked at me, and I looked at her, and I turned around, and I took a drink. I took a drink out of that bottle because I did not have a choice. I didn't have a thinking problem. I don't have a thinking problem when I'm drinking like that. I got a phenomena craving problem. Now, I don't know where people get a thinking problem, but if you got a thinking problem, then you should go back and take a look at any time whenever you had to drink and had no choice, because this is a twofold disease, and there's a phenomena craving associated with that. The leader talked about it just a little bit. That phenomena craving is always there. The animal's in the cage, but the door ain't locked. And standing in that hallway, I did not have a choice. And what I had done and where I had been made no difference. And shame was someplace where I'd been and gone right on by. And I took a drink out of that bottle because I had to. Because physically, I had to have a drink. And I looked back down that hallway and that little girl was gone. I know what it's like to crawl out of the back of that house needing a drink, wanting a drink, got to have a drink. I got to have a drink. I'm talking about everything about me has to have a drink. And the only thing I could think about was getting a drink and getting the money to get a drink. And the only money in that house was in my daughter's piggy bank. And I crawled down the hallway. Big time Charlie like me. Crawled down the hallway where the only money in that house is in my daughter's piggy bank. Crawled in there and pulled it out from underneath her bed, and I broke it. And I'm separating the pennies, nickels, dimes, and the quarters because a big-time slick like me ain't going to take no pennies down to the liquor store or the connections house. I'm going to be flashing silver when I go. And I'm separating that dough. And I don't know about you, but my kind of an alcoholic, when they're doing things like that's got eyes in the back of my head, and I know what it's like to glance over my shoulder and see my little 10-and-a-half-year-old daughter hiding in the closet. She's got a black eye and a busted lip, and I'm pretty sure I had something to do with it. She didn't go to school that day because she looked that way, and it wasn't because she was ashamed of the way she looked, because she looked that way a lot. It was because if she'd gone to school looking like that, the cops would have come and got Daddy. And that ain't bad because that gives Mommy and her a rest. The problem is Daddy comes home. Daddy comes home. So it was just easier to crawl in that closet. It was just easier to crawl in that closet. And I don't know about you, but a big-time slick like me, I give that kid a break. I gave her a break. Can you imagine that? I give her a break. I let her shoot out behind me without inflicting any more pain in her life. Because at that point in time in my drinking, if you caught me at those kind of, demoralizing situations, it was necessary for me to inflict some kind of a painful situation in your life, either verbally or physically, so that it took away from the memory of what you saw me doing. And being the very best father I could be that day, I give that kid a break and I let her shoot out behind me without inflicting any more pain. And if you can imagine living like that a day or a week or a month, then maybe you can imagine. Maybe some of you have been there. Maybe some of you have been in the closet. What's even worse, maybe some of you are going. But if you can imagine the terror and the bewilderment and the absolute hopelessness of living that way for 4 years, every day, every week, every month, for 4 years. My family lived that way because I reigned that damn household with terror, and so did everybody else around me. I ran out of friends and enemies at the same time. I had nobody. And if you can imagine living that way, then let me share this with you. The reason we come here is not to live in that pain. That's where I come from. My past is my greatest asset, not yours. Your past is your greatest asset. But if you can imagine living in that kind of insanity, then don't cheat yourself out of this. Right now, this minute. That little girl is in that closet. She's sitting over there in an Al-Anon meeting, 32 years old. She stands tall, tall. For the last 10 years, she's been an international model. She's lived in Milan, Italy for the last 10 years. She married a young man over there, Nite, a very wealthy young man, a beautiful young man who loves her and treats her gentle. She had a career beyond your wildest drunken dreams. She goes to 3 or 4 Al-Anon meetings a week over there and sponsors 6 or 8 girls. Can you believe this? She had 19 years in the program, sponsored 8 girls, went to 3 meetings a week, had a career before she got married. Almost impossible to believe. And right now, tonight, she's here visiting this holiday. So if you can imagine that insanity that we came out, don't cheat yourself out of what this program will give you. See, don't cheat we don't come here to wallow in the guilt and the victim and stuff. That little girl loves her daddy. She's forgiven her daddy. When she was 9 years old, she went with my dad, and he got drunk and passed out in his mashed potatoes. And she sat there this morning and had breakfast with us. See? Because of this program. Because of this program and a loving God. That's what we're talking about. Hope. Experience, strength, and hope. See? Don't cheat yourself out of it. I heard a story about a family living in Europe. I love this story because it tells a lot of things. And if you listen to it, you might be able to figure something out about Alcoholics Anonymous. This family lived in Europe, and all their life they wanted to come to America, and they didn't have no money to come to America, so it was their dream, a father and a mother and a little girl, and they dreamt about coming to America. They read everything they could about coming to America. They decided to save their money and come to America. They got their money together, got all their clothes, their stuff together. They went down and bought passage on the great ocean liner, and they sailed, and 3 or 4 days out, while all they were doing was sitting in this room looking out the porthole. The father loved the mother loved the little girl. They loved each other. There was no problem. They weren't alcoholics. There were nothing. Just a good family. And every day they looked out the porthole. And all they could think about was as soon as the journey was over, their dream was going to come true. And every day all they ate was crackers and cheese because that's all they brought in their little basket. For 4 days they sat in there in that room with a dream and hope and love. After 4 days, the little girl told her father, Daddy, I just can't take it anymore. I got to have something else to eat. The father, being a good father, reached in his pocket, pulled out a quarter, gave it to the little girl, said, go up in the galley and get you some ice cream cone or something. The little girl left. She was gone 2 hours. Pretty soon she came back and a knock on the door. They opened the door, and there she was. She was smiling, she was happy, and she was full, and she was excited, and everything about her was great. And the mother and father said, where you been? We've been worried sick about you. Said, I've been up in the galley. I had steak, I had potatoes, and I had 2 ice cream cones. And the father said, you could get that on a quarter? She said, sure, Daddy, the food's free. It comes with a ticket. That's a story about teachers. That's a story about ignorance. Don't be ignorant about this thing. God and this spiritual way of life is free. It comes with a ticket. I don't want crackers and cheese, man. I had crackers and cheese when I came here. I don't want that. I want the steak and taters. I want the whole enchilada. I want this deal. I want it to happen to everything about me. I want to feel good. I want to stand and look you in the eye. I want to be able to forgive myself. I want to be able to help the newcomers. I want to share experience, strength, and hope. That's what I came to Alcoholics Anonymous for. I didn't come to Alcoholics Anonymous to turn it off. I came to Alcoholics Anonymous to turn it on, to be able to live life, to walk out on them streets, to have the relationship I have with my father. 2 men that hated each other and loathed each other for years. When my mother was pregnant going into the delivery room, my father told the doctors, if it's a choice, kill the kid. I want to keep the woman. We can always have kids. And we used to get drunk and talk like that to each other. That didn't make me an alcoholic. It didn't make me an alcoholic. I made me an alcoholic. I drank my way into Alcoholics Anonymous. And what a great, great gift my God gave me. What an unbelievable affliction. So that I might find a way to find my God, so that my God might put a family back together and give me the relationship with my father that I always really wanted. And so did he. To forgive each other. But that lady I live with, when I was a newcomer, my sponsor, Rotten Ron, sent me over to all the police stations in all the towns around where I lived, and he had me go look up all my arrest records, and I was arrested 57 times for assault and battery and resisting arrest in the last 5 to 10 years of my drinking. And 31 of those had to do with me beating my family, violence, physical violence with my family. Now people say I never hit a woman. Well, you never lived with my wife either. I mean, she's the kind of woman that'd, get right in your face, and you'd say, get out of my face or I'm going to hit you, and she'd take one step closer, and then she'd hit you, and the fight would be on. But physical violence was a run-of-the-mill, everyday thing. And when I came to Alcoholics Anonymous on May 11th, 1976, there's some absolutes. Very important absolutes. If you're new or relatively new, if you've been around here and you're disturbed, let me tell you, it isn't just about quitting drinking. When I came to Alcoholics Anonymous just to quit drinking and using, I couldn't stay quit. When I came to Alcoholics Anonymous on May the 11th, 1976, for me, I ain't hit my wife, haven't hit my daughter or anybody else. I ain't cheated on my wife in 19 and a half years, and she hadn't cheated on me. See, I haven't written a hot check in over 19 and a half years. See, there's some absolutes that I had to quit. I had to have abstinence from that stuff in order to stay sober. It wasn't just the thing that I come here and, well, I'm going to quit drinking. I owed over $250,000 to people that you can't write them a letter and say, I'll send you $100 a month when I came to Alcoholics Anonymous. I've had to make all those financial amends in 19 and a half years. And most of that was for stuff that I didn't have nothing to show for it. I don't mind making financial amends for stuff that I can show you my new car sitting out here, but by God, when you got to make financial amends for stuff you ain't got, it's a little rough. Plus, I kept my wife and my family clothed and took care of them. Now, I ain't going to say I did it all perfect, because I'm a thief. And part of the amends that I paid back was with hot money, but it went to hot people. But that got hot too. And the path gets narrower. And at 10 years sober, why the federal grand jury had a little indictment on me for the way I was making my amends. And they didn't necessarily want to hear my AA resume. Can you imagine that? And at 10 years sober, I went through the most brutal, ego-deflating experience I've ever had in my entire life. And I'm grateful for that today, looking back on it. I certainly wouldn't want to go through that one again, but it was necessary. And I think we all have to go through those things. If you read the book AA Comes of Age, Dr. T-Bout in his lecture said the alcoholic ego will revive itself over and over and over again, and then it must be smashed repeatedly, not pushed down, smashed repeatedly in order to have continuous sobriety. And I have had immense ego deflation, and at the max. And I'm not grateful for that. It's just, I wish my cross to bear would have been lust. It just wasn't. And I've had to, the anger that I carried inside of me whenever I was drinking, I would go out there and beat on people and ventilate. And whenever I sobered up, I couldn't do that anymore. And so it went inward, and it almost destroyed me physically because it went inward. And the only thing that I've been able to find that will allow that to process is a pencil and paper. I'm a real pencil and paper person. And I write and write and write and write. When I first started writing, it looked like I did it with a Hershey bar, man. I mean, be sure and dot those I's with an almond, but I got it out. And I've been able to see where I was wrong. And that's the hardest part for an alcoholic to do, to see what part I played. And because I came here and I said, I don't mind making amends. Wrong is wrong, right is right, black's black, white's white, no problem. But if you had anything to do with me, you had to be a little bit wrong, I might be 99% wrong, and you're 1% wrong, but hey, wrong is wrong. Why do I have to make amends to you? And they said, cause. And I didn't argue with that. And I've tried to do that to the best of my ability. And what has happened is that, I have a good life. I woke up next to that lady this morning. We fit after 35 years, gut to butt. We just kind of fit, And she's my buddy. And, I got a good life. And I got a good home, and it's a home. And, I'm not, that isn't what everybody gets. A lot of the damaged families don't stick with us. But mine did, and mine had. My daughter's been fortunate enough to model at some of the greatest fashion shows in the world. And that isn't a success story. On Wednesday night, for years, she goes and gets on a train. She takes several of her girls sometimes. It costs $25, $30 one way. And she rides a train from Milan, Italy out to a NATO base. Goes through a NATO base full of a bunch of jarheads out there whistling and yakking at them that acted just like her dad and his friends. And she ain't afraid of them. She grew up with that kind. Goes right in there, goes to a meeting every Wednesday night. That meeting has 15 to 16 people. And they don't stop that meeting till everybody's through sharing, which means at 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, her and her girls come back out, go get on that train, pay $30 a piece to ride that train 3.5 hours back home. A lot of people won't even go to a meeting if it's around the block. That's why my daughter has what she has, not because of me. Not because of me. Because I came to Alcoholics Anonymous and I said, I'm going to try. And I had a rule in my house when I sobered up finally. Everybody who lives in that house has to have a program. And I made my daughter go to Alateen. I think one of the most hypocritical things an alcoholic can do that has children is to say, I'm not going to make my kids go to Alateen. I've heard them enough. How could you possibly come to a program like this, 12 steps, that has an opportunity to give you a God of your own understanding that sets you free and deprive your kid of that? How could you be that hypocritical? And I made my daughter go to Alateen. I gave her permission to hate me for a year and a half because I made her go to Alateen. And after a year and a half, she came home one night and she was lit up like a Roman candle. And a little girl would come in there, beat down just like her, and ask her to be her sponsor. And my daughter's been active in doing that. And she's been very active in Milan over there translating the literature, because the Italians lose a lot in translation because they talk with their hands, you know. And she started speaker meetings and eating meetings and taping meetings, and got the alcoholics and the Al-Anons to come together so they could have family recovery and family meetings. She started Alateen and preteen over there, and very, very active. And that's why she's is what she is, and that's why she's radiant and beautiful, and that's why she can walk out on those ramps at those fashion shows and she's not inhibited. See? And she don't have to outthink or outperform or outmaneuver anybody. She's just herself. At 32 years old, she's still modeling, plus running one of those shows. See? So that's what we bring here, not the fact that the kid was hiding in the closet beat up. That's a disease. That's a disease. It takes time. It took almost 12 years for that little girl and I to wash out the laundry. There was a time when I was drunk. I come out of a bad run in about 10 days, and I came home and I was drunk, and I ruled everything around me, like I said, with fear. And my daughter had her hair in her face and her chin on her chest, and I had a lot of weird people around me. And the only thing, my daughter had a friend. She brought a dog home, and she was loving on that dog, and I killed that dog in front of her and in front of everybody around to prove my power, my strength, because if they showed any weakness, they'd be next. My daughter hated me for that. I don't believe that sitting in church and getting up and walking down the aisle and getting baptized and come back and everybody in that room pray for me that I wouldn't drink, and walking outside and drink was any worse or any better. Because I drank in spite of the fact that everybody in the house of God prayed for me, and that destroyed their belief in God. But when you do something physically that umbrellas them with something to show them that if you do this, you're next, it embeds something in their mind that they hold there for years. And when my daughter was in Alateen 6 years, she was 19 years old, making the transition into Al-Anon. And when she was making the transition to Al-Anon, she got an Al-Anon sponsor, and she had to go do the steps again. She was sitting on a fourth step, and her and I were asked to go share at a father and daughter banquet, Alateen and AA. And about Tuesday of that week, I knew she's sitting on that fourth step. And I went to her and I said, you know, if you don't do your fifth step, I'm not going to go with you Saturday. And she said, well, you can't tell me when I can do my steps. And I said, I'm not telling you when to do it. What I'm telling you is that I'm not going to sit out there in that audience and let you do a fifth step with us. And you're sitting on a fourth step, so I know you will. And you can go any way you want. But if you don't do a fifth step, I ain't going. And so she hustled and finally went out and did her fifth step with her sponsor and came back. And she said, you know, Dad, one of the reasons that I hated was balking on that fifth step was that I hated you for what you did to that dog. I long ago, being in the program 6 years, recognized that what you did to that animal was alcoholism. It was a disease, and that you love animals and you're very kind and gentle to them. And what I saw happen there was just an example of the insanity of this disease. But what I found in my inventory was that for a year and a half, I took my cat and put it in the dryer and spun that dryer for a few revolutions or seconds. And I'd open that door and the cat would jump out and cling to me. And what I didn't want to admit about me was that was my interpretation of love. And at 19 years old, I can see that that's not. That the disease of alcoholism affected me as well as you, and that I don't want that kind of a relationship. And when I saw that what I did to that cat was my interpretation of love, out of fear that animal clung to her, and that's what she thought love was, because that's how her and her mother were all the time. And at 6 years in this program, 19 years old, she could see that, she let go of that, and she has a fantastic relationship. Fantastic relationship, because she could look at those things and quit blaming me. She could look at those things and see the disease and quit blaming herself. And she could forgive her, and she could forgive me, and I could forgive me. You know, I don't know a whole lot about God. I'm much of an action man. But I heard a story that explains my God. Since my father's here, I'll tell it, because he's part of it. And then I'll shut up. There was a story of a little cobbler man. A little cobbler. He died and went to heaven. He was a beautiful man. Had a family, worked hard all his life. When he got to heaven, he'd stand in front of God, and God said, man, you were a good man. You worked real hard, took care of all your family, your neighborhood, your family, your community. Beautiful man, except one flaw. You had one flaw. And the cobbler asked God, what was that? He said, you never really believed 100% in your God. And God said, well, you remember one day it was a cold day, and you looked out the window of your shop, and there was a little girl walking along out there, and you went and brought her in, and you set her down on a seat there and put your coat around her, and you noticed she sat up on that bench there in your shop that she had holes in the bottom of her shoes. So all you could give her, since you were a shoemaker, was that you pulled her slippers off, and you went over and put new soles on her shoes so her feet could stay warm, and you put them back on, and you went back to work, and pretty soon you heard a rustling little noise, and you looked up, and the little girl was walking out the door, and just as she was about to walk out the door, she turned and looked at you, and she smiled. Cobbler said, yeah, I remember that. God said, well, you remember another day. There was another day whenever you were looking out there in your shop working real good, and there was an old bum came down the street. And he didn't have any money, and he came in and he wanted some money to get something to eat. You had no money because all your money took for your family. But you had a couple of sandwiches in a bag. And he sat down on a bench next to you, and you shared your lunch with him, and you sat there without uttering a word. And when it came time for him to leave, he reached over and shook your hand, and the cobbler told God, yeah, I remember that. God said, well, another day, a little old lady was going down the street, and she was lost and confused, and being a good Samaritan, you went out and got her and brought her in, and found out her son was up the street. You went and got him, and reunited him, and she was happy, and came time for her to depart, and she said, bless you, my son. And the cobbler told God, yeah, I remember all those things, so what? God said, well, the little girl's smile was my smile. That bum's handshake was my touch. And that little old lady's bless you, my son, was my voice. You just couldn't hear, and you couldn't see, and you couldn't feel. Now, you know, riding up here with my dad. My dad will be 80 years old January the 1st. And I love him. He's my old man. Thank you. And there's been some tough times. They ain't always easy, but in them tough times in the last 18 plus years, we've been able to stand together, put our arm around each other. When my old man puts his arm around me, I want to believe that's my God touching me. I can do that. When I woke up this morning laying next to that lady, we've been together 35 years. We've been through hell. We've been through heaven. And like every morning when she gets up out of that bed or I get up out of that bed, we say it no matter what. I love you, babe. And she always says, thank you for your sobriety, for physical sobriety. And if I want to believe that's my God talking to me, I can. And like Monday I'm going to go down here to LAX, and I'm going to take that little girl back down there, and I'm going to drop her off over there, and I'm going to walk down that road with her, and we're going to go in there to that gate. And like always, she's going to head up through that international gate, and like always, she's going to stop up there, and she's going to smile at me. And if I want to believe that's my God smiling at me, I can. Now, you might say that ain't right, but you can't say I'm wrong, because I feel good about me. God bless and thank you.
Okay, this is how I prepare my drone for launching. I like to do it inside the cab of my truck so I'm not standing outside in the weather. To install the joysticks for control, up and down, right and left, powered on. I have an Android phone that I use to connect it to the drone with. And it's actually controlled through the iPhone, through an app. Oops, wrong way. It's actually controlled through the iPhone, or through this Android phone, through the app. It's actually controlled through the Android phone, through an app, and you connect it through this short connection right here.
Remote control connected.
Remote control is connected. So I pull out the drone. I have to extend the legs. Long legs extended first, then the short legs. Remove the gimbal protector. Set that aside, then power it on one short burst and one long burst. I lay it down. So I have to go to calibrate. So the drone's not connected yet. It shows you here as this drone gets disconnected, even though the remote's powered on. So the drone has to establish it's connected. So I go into the app to calibration mode. First I'll calibrate the remote controller. Start calibration. Out, in, out, in, up, down, and then this little wheel is to control the gimbal. So it's calibrated. Go to gimbal calibration, start calibration, and then it calibrates the gimbal. I don't know if that shows up. The gimbal's moving all over the place. Changes, you can see it on the video. And I'm calibrated to take off. It's acquired 7 satellites at the moment. There are 26 satellites up in the sky, which it has to acquire before you can take off. So it's connected. It's got enough satellites. This is white. I can go to press this little arrow button, swipe right to take off, and it would start the motors if I slid this to the right, but I'll wait till I get outside. Don't want to do it inside.